Howdy, I have a J50 here that is in need of a pickguard reglue. It has a few loose braces. I just made a new saddle for it. It wasn't in the budget with the owner to replace this bridge that, again, is just out of Gibson spec. Hate to see that on a beautiful crack-free instrument like this, but that is what it is. So we got a compensated saddle that he asked me to make. Really wanted a compensated saddle. Sometimes I like to make them look more like they came from the factory, but in this case he wanted it to intonate perfectly, or as close to perfectly as he could get it. So that's what we've done. And I'm gonna repair these braces, but first I'm gonna pull this pickguard off. These guards oftentimes, well, I guess invariably, shrink more quickly than the wood, and as that material contracts and is glued to the top of the guitar, it will cause the infamous pickguard crack. And oftentimes right here will split, right here will split, or up here will split. And this one is peeling away itself, and this corner is a little loose, up in the front is a little loose. And it requires taking the pickguard off, letting it sit for at least a few days for it to shrink and acclimate without the tension of being glued to the top of this guitar, and then glue it back on. So to do that, we got to take it off, and that's what I'm about to do. On this guitar, first thing I'm always going to do on any guitar is check the grain orientation by the reflectivity of light. Once I've got an idea of the orientation of the grain on an instrument, I'm going to take my implements and slowly work away very gently. These are my tools. You can see this area is already loose. I'm going to work around the edges. Oftentimes the center is the hardest spot to get to come loose. And we're going to do this with ideally as little tear out as possible. I like to work the edges. Oh, you know, first thing always to do, almost forgot, take an X-Acto blade and score around the edge ever so lightly. Give me a good crisp line. And that's going to keep lacquer from tearing away and will help us where any wood might tear away as well. Just a gentle score with an X-Acto blade. You see I didn't do this area where the pickguard is already loose. And this is something that takes time. There's no need to rush it. If you're to rush it, you can break these pickguards, especially sanding them. You always want to get a little score on the bottom and flatten them out as best as you can before you re-glue them. So no matter what, you're going to be gentle. No need to force it, no heat involved on these. Whereas pulling out frets, pulling a neck, we're going to use heat, but this celluloid is highly flammable, or is oftentimes inclined to melt. So here, no heat used. You can see I'm working around the edges towards the center. I also like to use a pretty thin palette knife when I'm doing this, so as to where there's spots that are glued and you're lifting them around, it doesn't make that sort of wave, or the wave is as thin as possible. See, these Crafts palette knives are very thin. Good for that. I use them for all kinds of things. So this side I've now got loose all the way up to about here. Sometimes these really want to come off. Sometimes they like to hold on a little better. Isn't that light nice coming in through the window? So I can feel it starting to get closer to wanting to give. Not the time to rush it. That's when you a big spot of tear out. You thought I wanted to go. Now we're loose to here. There she goes. And your moment of truth. That's about as clean as you would hope. You can see there's very thin layer of tear out. And on any bridge reglue, anything of that nature, where you're taking a piece off and then regluing it, you're gonna get that skin layer. But really what will be more revealing is as you look at the guitar itself. Let me pop out of my tripod.